Leadership Series, the Pan-African Leadership Series. I am Dr. Mwata Kairi, Kevin Washington, and it is an indeed a pleasure to have a prolific thinker, a profound psychologist, African-centered psychologist, to be a part of the relaunch of this series on African consciousness. Dr. Mawia Campbell, we always call her Mama Mawia. She is a past president of the Black Psychologist. She is also an icon priestess. So she does a variety of things around the world, the African world. And so she has been a very profound inspiration for my life in understanding what it means to stand centered in your identity. She and her husband, Baba Kamal, and how they were able to facilitate a reality in the Carolinas, an African reality that was just really something that moved me and has moved me all of my life. And also the work that they do is also off the charts. And so I have been recently, Mama, we are seeing this term Blacknificent show up in all parts of the world. And I say I know who coined that phrase, that term. But I was seeing something in Barbados, and it's not Barbados, in St. Croix, and it said Blacknificent. And I was somewhere in the Gambia, and it had the word Blacknificent. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Baba Kamal's work his wording has moved globally. But first of all, let's go back to an introduction. So tell us about everyone about who you are and what it is that has moved you all of these years to stand firmly in your African-centered consciousness, to move from being a Black Negro identity. Dr. Courtney Lee talks about this. You're going from Donna Lee to Haki to moving into an African-centered reality that transformed your life and how you moved with your family.
So I have to give credit to my ancestors, especially my grandmother, Billy Dunstan Hill, and my grandfather, Frederick Davis Hill, who raised me. They may not have known African consciousness as we call it and claim it, but they understood setting values for a family, setting values that would assist us to become. And so I had a lot of freedom growing up. And of course, with, a lot of freedom, you don't know, and unconsciousness, you don't always make the best choices. And fortunately, because they had tight reins around me, it kept me from making extreme choices. But I think it was I know it was after I went to college. I went to a PWI, University of Connecticut. I was raised in Connecticut. I was born in New York, raised in Connecticut, and went to UConn. And it was also in the 60s. I got there in 65, and we started our Black Power movement in around 68, 69. We took over and I was in it, but I really wasn't one of the organizers of it, taking over administration building. They got a little out of hand, so I left. And but it started understanding that here we were in this state-owned, state-run institution where our tax dollars were going, and there was nothing Black to be seen. University of Connecticut at that time had 10,000 students. On our campus, we had, in my class, 15 Blacks. On the whole campus, in the whole university, there were 30, and some of them were from the continent. So we were very close, you could say, we were very close and did things together. But the stark reality, there were no Black professors. So we lobbied for a Black house and got it, started seeing Black professors come up. One of the advantages, though, of that, a lot of Black institutions, historically Black colleges, were not allowing the revolutionaries on their campus, but they did it. So I got to hear a lot of the speakers come through. Back then it was Donnell Lee and Nikki Giovanni, who's now Haki, his name. Haki came on, Panthers came, many of those who we needed to hear from to start to formulate my understanding of what we were going through as a people. Certainly, the North was so-called integrated, but not in church. And, after you got to junior high school, not even your social interactions. And that was okay with us. We didn't realize that there was a larger issue, that racism and discrimination were keeping our people from being able to rise economically. So my family was okay. We had uh, people to see there. We had black doctors, and people tend to migrate toward their own, but not exclusively, again, because, the North had been integrated for quite a bit of time. But, Jackie Robinson lived in our town. And so that was an inspiration, to see him and his family move through. His daughter Sharon was a year behind me in high school. And so we, got to see and be in Blackness, but not really conscious of it. So it was during that time when the March on Washington came, when I was in high school, and that people were beginning to talk. And so by the time I got to college, that was in me. And so then coming out of college, I moved. My mother had always lived in New York, so I moved to New York because my grandparents had come down here south to North Carolina, where they originally had come from. So I went to New York, and it was ripe with, culture, Black culture, dance troupes, the Dinazulu dance troupe, Chuck Davis. Of course, it had always been filled with jazz and artists, and even through, junior high school and high school, I would come down to New York to listen to the Apollo, Brooklyn Fox, places like that, where, you got to see our people rich in the culture. But the consciousness came, I think, through connecting with groups like Dinazulu's dance troupe, and the comments that were made in lectures, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, and all of those who were beginning to help that culture gain a consciousness. And so that culture, which was rich, had to be connected to with an understanding of how things, how this within us was not being fed. And then what we needed to do to rise ourselves up and to begin to fight the struggle. So, by 68 and 63, there was a death of Malcolm and Martin and all of these that came through our culture at that time, and that had a significant impact. And so by then, in the late 60s, early 70s, my consciousness was growing strong. And that's when I met my husband. We were both in graduate school together at another PWI, Columbia University. He was working on his doctorate. I was working on a master's. And we had a group then, which was, I thought, ABCI's student group, but it was BSPA, which was the, Black organization of the psychologists, the other group that I'm not going to call their name. But we were all, it was also at the same time, though, we were becoming much aware of the Association of Black Psychologists and really were emulating them. So we had then, let's see, I'm not calling name, I can see him, Nancy Boyd's husband, name's Franklin, Dr. Franklin, started to organize us as a student group. And so she was one of our group members. So eventually she became his wife. And we became organized around Black psychology, and so that led me to the Association of Black Psychologists, where I, didn't join initially, but was there listening to the speakers. So got to hear, everybody, the Bobby Wrights, the Asa Hilliards, the still with us Wade Nobles and Naeem Akbar, and the famous couple, let's see, who was
Out of San Francisco.
Spitfire. Yeah.
It's coming.
So that there were, yeah, it's coming. I can see her and him. And she was really the Spitfire,
Yes.
So Joe White and Dr. Joe White, I need to put handles on these, as my great aunt would say. So these were beginning to have an impact, or having a significant impact on my life. What I didn't realize, that everybody wasn't feeling the same way. Everybody wasn't being exposed in the same way, that this fire within me was burning. And so I began to read more, and I would go to ABSI every year, or almost every year, because I needed that to help me through my years, and help me through my consciousness. It wasn't until mm, was it 90s in the 90s that I became active, and I had been involved in being there and doing things. And I was asked by we were restarting the General Assembly, which had been proposed and accepted by our association many years ago, and that had been developed by Dr. Halford Fairchild and Dr. Maisha Bennett. But nobody had done anything. So we were getting ready to start it, and Dr. Halford Fairchild asked me if I would be the first chair of the General Assembly. And so, even though it was a 2-year term, I came on an odd year, so I served 3 years, and we were a very, very active group. And so much so that so much work of the ABCI got done, because that team of people, who are so many, I can't call all the names, would stay up late at night to get the work of the association done. But then they would party. They had bidwiz games and all these kinds of things that I watched, because couldn't play it, and they were serious. So you don't play with that. you know our people get serious about those card games. And so, but it was a release, and we need those sometimes. We need a release from the hard work, but staying on task. And I am so proud to have served the Association of Black Psychologists as its first General Assembly chair. And I could only be as good as those many beautiful Black psychologists that worked within it. And I'm so grateful for that. And so during that time, though, was the time, of course, sitting on the board, we decided that it was time to, we had already gone to Jamaica by then, I think, but we needed an international trip, and we needed it back to Ghana. Nope, excuse me. We needed it to Africa. And so we proposed, and I had already, in 72 been to Ghana and had loved my experience there. That was when Ghana, you could walk down the unpaved roads, and the fruit trees were dropping fruit on the ground. So one of my dear sister friends proposed Senegal, and I proposed Ghana, and Ghana won, as you know. Little did I know that in the 10-year, during that period, we had a backwards track to the continent, where we were going from enslaved states to reclaim our way back to the continent. And so we did that. And little did I know that I would be the president of the association when we made that famous trip. So you never know what the ancestors have in store for you. And I know that one of my elders had really wanted to be president then, but he'd already been president, so, but it was a tremendous experience. The speakers we had, as you know, are Nana Nome Baba Asa Hilliard was our keynote speaker. We had Baba Dr. Kofi Opoku, who wrote the treatise on African traditional religions, was a speaker. We had so many great activities. We got to sit with the Asante Hene and give him a plaque,
Yes.
Which, when I go back, I try to see if I can see it, but I don't. And so that's the formulation of my consciousness. And it can only go from there. I am fortunate enough to have a partner with me who has walked with us. We have walked side by side in this journey to bring Black consciousness, African consciousness in the steps we do and the work we do and everything that we're about. So I know I've been going on, and there's much more, but that's really an introduction to my African consciousness.
That is a powerful journey. You mentioned about Yukon, right? Connecticut. We want to make sure that people that we recognize those that have joined us. Mama, we are from around the world, right? So Demetrius Eric asked what part of the Carolinas it is. Charlotte, Charlotte, and Charlotte, North Carolina, that Mama Maria is currently residing.
No,
So,
I'm
and
in
it's
I'm in the Raleigh. I'm in Raleigh,
Raleigh,
North
Durham,
Carolina.
Raleigh, Durham. That's right, Raleigh, Durham. And
Yeah.
so that's right.
No,
And
Raleigh,
so
not Raleigh and Durham are two separate cities.
and I was talk about
The
the
airport is Raleigh, Durham.
the Twin Cities. It gets linked together. Just like
Right.
I'm out of Louisiana. Everybody says New Orleans. It's like no, that's not the New Orleans and Louisiana are two different things, right? It's a city and there's a state. So yes, I got it. I stand corrected. Yes, Raleigh. And so we have people from family from Cameroon right now. Mama, we are listening to is St. Kitts. We have individuals from South Sudan, Liberia. So this is a global conversation that is being held, which is one of the things I was excited about with ABSI, is moving into the international discourse, which is actually what you did. You actually, and part of that trek, you took us back through, not that you personally, but the process of the ancestors, right, took us back to, and under your leadership, we were in Ghana, which I was really enamored with Africa, especially after that trip. I just come back from South Africa, but I was so upset about going to South Africa first because I wanted to start with West Africa, right? But just to be able to have the conversations between the two spaces and to know how home Ghana felt, it was really amazing. So I thank you for that particular conversation. You said several things that I think are worthy of noting, right? One thing is that the idea of being African in your childhood or growing up or having African consciousness, but it wasn't acknowledged as such. I think that's something that we often miss. Is that how Malcolm says that Africa is born in us, right? The idea that it's already within us, and we find ways to connect, and that's the idea of consciousness as well. I think that the global African community should understand that at some level, a part of who we are and how we function, even though we're in different spaces, the essence of who we are comes through. And so you mentioned this, the awakening of that essence, right? At a space where you were deprived. A piece that I don't want to miss is that you said that the HBCUs will not allow certain voices to be heard, which becomes this idea of these spaces being bastions of holding down the Eurocentric thought. And so we have to look at ways of moving beyond that. And I think I want to pause there to kind of get your feedback on this idea of how is it that African people, whether we have HBCUs or whether we're on the continent, how is it that we become the purveyors of the destruction of our people through Eurocentric thought and consciousness? And then how was it that you were able to chip away and crack and break some of that hole that they had on your psyche? So because we become the gatekeepers for Western thought in many ways, and that's what you mentioned. So, and that's not only in the U.S. We find it on the continent,
Right.
all over. Yes.
So yeah, as you said, I'm doing a study group with a group of sisters now, and this was part of our conversation last week because the sisters here, and we have a sister in Ghana, who they assume, the ones born here assume that Africa was free, and as she comes on, she talks about her education, and that uh, we don't want to do comparisons, but the schools there are rote learners, and they beat you into submission, literally, with sticks, etc., if you speak out against or for yourself. So those born here didn't realize the extent that it went, but they do it more subtly with us. We are still in their schools receiving their education with no knowledge, no acceptance of truth of all the people here, not the indigenous that lived here, never in your stories, not us, except for enslavement. And that's the process in which it occurred. Enslavement brought us their religion, and we grabbed to that because we're a spiritual people. And that was our salvation. to be into the religion in a spirit-based way that gave us some semblance of a freedom. Yet the indoctrination never stopped on any level. The schools are just factories to prepare you to support their corporation, this corporation, which is the United States of America. This is a major corporation under which there are multiple corporations. This one being tied, of course, to England. So we're all enslaved under that corporation. But that our people, because they're given trinkets, are allowed to receive trinkets, even though some of them die trying to get them, feel that they're free, that they can make choices. There's nothing about democracy in America. There's nothing about freedom, except in those countries like we had Mugabe, we had certain folks who stood up and spoke against Thomas Sankara, and we saw what happened to them, which was intentional to set fear. We've seen the 5 African presidents recently who were killed because they refused to accept the vaccine, so that this intent to keep us under thumb is real. So how did I break out? It's because this was an ancestor's design, So I can't say that consciously I was even aware, but I know it was an ancestor's design because I came from a very strong grandmother. My people have been here, we can trace back to the 1700s, and coming here in North Carolina. So that we went north. My grandmother went north in, I don't know what year, but my mother was born up there. So that was 27. She was born 1927. And, so she spent time there, but this land here, North Carolina, related to her because it was land. And our people gain energy and strength from being in nature and being in land. So she didn't know much about Africa, except that she could trace back that I had relatives who were midwives. And we can trace back to one who we really feel was a spiritual healer, so that she would have been my great grandmother. And so that it was born in me, was allowed to be nurtured and nourished by a grandmother who believed in children. So I grew up with my grandmother owning a daycare center. So she was the first largest daycare center in Stamford, Connecticut, and gained great acclaim as a result of the kind of work she did. Because not only did she care for the children, she cared for their parents too. So she and her little crew of women would go out and deal with abuse. If there was domestic violence, they would show up at the door to take the sister from the house, to protect them. There were so many different things, and we went along. So we got to see some of these things in action. If somebody messed with us at school, I'm talking about teachers or administrators, my grandmother went to the school and set them straight. So we didn't get messed with. We were smart, so we didn't have a whole lot of trouble. But she didn't take no mess. And so that fire in this Aries, put together, assisted me in my growth in consciousness.
We want to thank those that are coming in that are with us again from Kenya as well. We even have a student here, Olivia, from Grambling State University. So this is again a global conversation. And also thank Ricardo Bradford for reminding us of the importance of libation, which is actually what Mama Wee is doing in calling up her ancestors. So the idea of calling up those within our various families. So you mentioned this awakening process. You mentioned the call from the ancestors, and I recognize that our institutions become the holding areas for us sometimes not moving forward, and that's some of the things that our people have had to fight against. Like Harriet Tubman said that I could have freed more if they had only known that they had been slaves, or and others, right? Many of our insurrections and so forth were actually thwarted because somebody went to go tell what was going on with what's going on with us. And so the idea here is that, right, that we get get locked, right? Because our own people began to buy into Eurocentric thought in Ghana. I mean, you mentioned a religion. How many times do you travel around Ghana and see a white image of Jesus, right? And so all of these things are things that are keeping us locked into thinking small of ourselves. But you talk about breaking that. Dr. Naim Akbar mentions the idea of breaking the chains of psychological slavery, and breaking that through the process of literature, of content, of action. So I've heard several things that you mentioned. One was activism, but also you had content, substance to draw from. And one of the things that you all did in the Raleigh area is that you've had a bookstore, right? You were helping to break consciousness. You helping to break the chains there with the bookstore. And also, you've taken your conversation globally. So I want people to understand that it's not simply a U.S. conversation. This is a global African conversation. But I want to bring it back to this. One of the things that I found to be so amazing is that you all had Blacknificent Bookstore. And in this space, or you have it, in this space that you all had discussion groups and so forth. I mean, that was just really amazing. So how did you develop that? And how was that a part of the process of breaking the chains of psychological slavery of African people?
I think part of that, we bought this building, and the intent was to have a bookstore. Yet it was a big building, and I saw this great big space in the back that needed to be also a cultural center, so that we could encourage and have a space where people could come. There are a lot of bookstores where people have to mingle within the books and find space, but we wanted a dedicated space. And so, with that, Kamau, as you said, coined the phrase. He said it came to him in a dream, blacknificent, that we are more than magnificent. We are blacknificent. And so that we wanted to bring that forward for our people to understand that about themselves. And the cultural center within the same building is the Benu, because that is the story of the Benu bird, who goes back, and people may know of the phoenix, but it's truly from our ancestry, the Benu bird, that brings culture and sciences and arts for 500 years, and then builds a fire where he plunges back in and then comes out anew. And that's what we wanted for our people, to be able to have a space where that could occur. But so we had this bookstore, but we realized that the people in the area weren't buying the books because they had no knowledge of the content. So we had to bring the speakers in for them to be able to hear. And later on, there was a radio program at St. Aug, where my husband worked at that time, St. Augustine's College, where that with Tom Pope as at the helm, who always announced it. So we got more and more people to come. So, we could sit 100, but there were people who always were standing. And so we brought in people like my son, Khalid Muhammad, came in several times. He would just sometimes get off the bus and walk down. We had, who have we had? We've had Professor Griff. We had, as I mentioned, Kofi Opoku. We had our Aikwe Arma. We've had, I could go on and on. Just the Dr. Finch, Charles Finch. We had the think tank there, as you know, from ABSI, where Baba Wade Nobles and Tawedi, Cheryl Grills, yourself, and Tasogli, and that was a rich think tank that we had there to develop the African centeredness of our psychology. So that, I think, was the way to help people understand that there's more to us than what we've been given. And that there are people out here who are trying to disseminate that information, but have no place, no voice in which to do. We had Dr. Ben there, keep thinking Claude Anderson, so many folks that came through there over the 20 years that we had it functioning. And so that continued to inspire us, and therefore was for our children who were in public school, but we couldn't let that be. They had to have the knowledge of who we are in order to become who they are. And we see that because we feel like our son has just jumped over us and moved forward as should be with the knowledge and the work that he's doing. So, yes, we did those things. We also believed ourselves before we even had the bookstore in what we should be doing as a representation of who we are. So we built our own home in the country, in nature, because nature is so vital to us as an African people, that nature and us are relatives, our cousins, our sisters and brothers. And we take it for granted because it informs us of so many things. And so my consciousness came, I think, as a result of being raised by the grandparents I was raised, because I wasn't raised in a crowded city. We had a little piece of land with a house, etc. And my grandmother cooked. So I was nurtured. She cooked every day. I'm listening to these young people that don't get home cooked meals because sisters don't believe it's their role and they don't want to cook, etc. I don't know what they're eating that's going to nurture and nourish this divine entity that is us, you know. So she cooked fresh. We didn't have fast foods, we didn't have things to cloud and crowd and infect our brain, you know. And so that was a benefit for me, you know. And so the other week on my show, we talked about cherished memories. And those cherished memories continue to assist me today to reflect on when there are hard times, that nothing that I can face possibly can be harder than what our ancestors faced. And so that helps me with my continuity forward in understanding that the work before us, the work at our feet right now, is important work, and there's nothing that can interfere with it. I cannot sit back. I cannot sit still and rest on the things that I have accomplished, because as long as one of us is in chains, we are all in chains.
You mentioned this, right? This idea of the space and the land. I think that is profound as well. This idea that you said that your ancestors understood that we have land. Don't know much about Africa, but I know that this idea of land, and we know that the enslaver was able to identify the various Africans that could engage in certain activities. So they understood that in the Senegambia region that there was rice, and so that's part of the Carolina gold and the rice. We understood what the Woloffs did. They understood what the Igbo. They had this idea of putting together a dream team of Africans that actually built this country.
Right.
And so this is, and I'm just coming back from Gambia and recognizing the power of the land all over again. I grew up in Louisiana, the same thing about the land, but something happened when I went to the Gambia and just really reconnecting with what does the land and earth mean in the space and the liberated zones.
Mhm.
And I think that that's one thing that you mentioned was a liberated zone to be able to think, to grow what you consumed. The idea of family coming together and enjoying the harvest, not only the harvest of the farm, but also the harvest of life, love, and living. And then you went into the fact that you all have found the bookstore to cultivate knowledge, right? So to germinate, get allow people to come in and germinate, to till the soil, to break up things, to put new seeds in. And so I saw that actually happening in Magnificent Bookstore. And then you talked about the space that you all bought, and I remember Baba Kamal talking about how you all built the space, right? You all were constructing. It wasn't just simply bringing people in to do the work. You were constructing it, and how you all protected what you were constructing, right? So this is powerful, and we're going to get to about it later because what happens at the seed that comes from you all of them are just doing some things that are just phenomenal in the world. But as we talk about the healing work, it seems that the activity of understanding the land, understanding the mind as a cultivated space to be cultivated, understanding how to put in substance in that space and pull that out seems to be one of the greatest elements of your work as a healer. And so you still do this work as an African-centered psychologist, is break up the soil, and you till it, and then you put in new substance, and you allow it to irrigate, right? Irrigate, to allow things to happen so people can think different about themselves. So Am I hitting that this is what you part of your calling is to break up stuff so that we can think differently about ourselves?
Yeah, in my psychology work, I call myself African centered, and my Baba Wade was says Saku Jetian work. Realize that I'm not separate from the spiritual healing work that I also do. So I remind people when they come to me that they're not alone. And this is strange for African people to hear, unfortunately, that they don't realize that they're not alone, that they come in already with all the tools they'll ever need to heal. It just has not been tapped yet. And all the sources around them, their ancestors, that have been waiting for them to ask for help, for them to acknowledge that they're there. And so in the space, there's less work for me to do because my role is to guide them back to the spiritness, as Mama Marimba says, remember what it is and who it is they are, so that they can then gain from that what it is they need to be able to move forward. So yes, putting those pieces back. And part of the activity in the work is that, my prescription: be in the sun, walk on the earth with no shoes, you know, breathe. I have a guided meditation channel, Onipa guided meditation. Breathe, meditate. Meditation, in our understanding and our culture as African people, is when you listen to what the spirit, what ancestors are saying. That's meditation. When you speak, that's what religions call prayer, you know. But it's just talking. I talk to them. They talk back to me. When they talk back to me, I meditate and listen, you know. And that is part of the healing journey that must occur in our wellness journey, that we need to know that. So breaking up is to break up the chains, those links, each of which has been put on by some aspect of European consciousness, of your Asian consciousness, because we cannot leave out the Arabs as well, and what they have done and what they are still doing on the continent, enslaving African people. That is a conscious thing that is going on right now that must be spoken about. And so that enslavement, yes, can be subtle, but it also is strong and physical. And we have to free all of us. And consciousness, in terms of the writing and the listening and all of that, must be a foundation for the work that has to be done. So Okanini Obadale says that it can't be just about study. It has to be work study. And you can't do the work unless you know the foundation for what you are working for. So we are reading a chapter from one of his students that looks at building, how you construct a building according to the needs and the culture of your community, that you just don't throw up a structure. So again, the ancestors spoke through me. Our great room where I'm sitting in now is 6-sided. My husband looked at that. It was called a hogan by the indigenous people because these angles have spiritual meaning. We're looking in Ghana at building, and you can see it on a BB Tumi, the structure we're building called Kemetu, the Kemetu structure. Kemetu is the people. We're building Kemet again, is an 8-sided structure, because 8 is an important number through all of our cultures. In the Dogon, uh, in Ghana, we came through Mali, so that we left some people there. I'm not going to get in a big story about how we have come to be and how we are now coming back as a people together. And so this is great that we have this global thing, because we are a global people. We are Kemetiu, Black people, wherever we are. And
You
Kemet
mean to tell me?
exists, land of Black people,
You mean to tell me
wherever we are.
The Pentagon is not a European thing to have a 5-sided figure, a building, the 6-sided? Oh my goodness! Oh, you're breaking some more change right here. That we understood the sides, and the sides had
And
spiritual
so
meaning.
understand too the lie of 9/11, that the structures that were put in place for Washington, D.C. were Kemetiu structures. Kemet meaning they have translated Egypt, to ensure that it could never be hit. That came from us. The Tekken, the Washington Monument, the different structures you go through. Dr. Anthony Browder will take you through a tour of the Egypt in DC. So you can see all the symbols they put around there to ensure that it would be protected. And so this understanding that we must get back. We must get back. It's not just bullets that will protect us. Our ancestors have created things for us to protect us for that were perpetuity, perpetuity. That there are things that we can do, that we must do, that we must reclaim to restore us as a people and protect us moving forward.
Amazing, right? That we don't recognize this is us. This is our connection. I want to make sure that people can get the various pieces that you mentioned. Anipu, you mentioned about the meditations. So I want to be sure to talk up to give us the way to contact you around that. And you mentioned the seed, and the fruit, and the tree, and I'm just really amazed, and not amazed in the sense of like it was something special that I need to be amazed by. The idea that how spirit moves when I see your children and I see what they have done with what you all have poured into them. To see your son on YouTube on a regular basis and to see what he's doing and to interact with your daughter and the business structure that she's established, and others. So the idea here is share with us about this cultivation of this, the continuity of African spiritness that you were able to share with your children that's now been a gift to us in the world.
Mhm. And even though some of it was intentional and conscious, we didn't realize the extent to which our children, as a result of us, they have told us, were not able to go work for corporations. They were not able to work outside of Black. And so they've never had except, a little jaunt during college or something for internships. Um, so I'll start with my oldest. My oldest is Ayana. She lives in Florida. She's a pediatrician, and that and because she's not consciously aware that she has a spiritual gift of healing, but that spiritual gift got transferred into the medical profession. So she operates there. The second is Nataki Yejire, and she, as you mentioned, is in business. So she tries to ensure that Black people can operate with within knowledge that we already have to establish business for themselves. And she has now developing with my granddaughter, my first granddaughter. My oldest daughter has 3 sons, but my granddaughter loves cooking. She's 13. So they now have in Quadria, where they are trying to develop a restaurant to give healthy vegan food, Ghanaian style, there. Um, and the one most people know of most is Okunini Obadele. And he is only on YouTube by accident because he does not like to promote their businesses. He is on a bbtumi.com. A bb2me stands for Black, not stands for, translates to Black Power. A bb Black to me power. .com. And so there's a bbtumi.com, a Tumi Casa, where they teach African languages, and a BB Tumi TV, where you can go and see videos of positive African activities. And so his whole thrust, he works at the University of Ghana, Legon. He's graduated from there as a linguist, the first one not born on the continent to receive prestigious award for his dissertation. and he speaks 5 African languages fluently and other languages. So it is in him. Everything that we thought we were teaching him, he absorbed and more. And so that he takes no prisoners. This is truly a platform for African Black people, and that understanding that we come in at different levels, but the point is if you continue here and stay strong, you will grow. You will grow and you will become more involved in your own liberation. And that's the goal, to liberate all African people so we can understand the taste of freedom. You don't get freedom until you're liberated. And we have to de-whitenize, as Brother Kamal would say, in order to re-Africanize. And we have moved from the word of African so much to kemet, because that was one of our most powerful civilizations. Um, and that we all came there to learn together and then took that knowledge back home to all other places of the continent and globe. So we hail Kemet for that role that she served for the cultivation of culture for our people. So yes, my son does much, and it's, he's up all times of the day and night, having developed this institution called the BB2Me. He has a partner who's helping him with all of the technical, and he does a lot. Brother, his name is also Kevin, and he lives in Pennsylvania. I'm losing his last name, you know, but that because we call him Quidjo, so I've lost his European name. And then, so yeah, we are very proud of our children, and then how he's trying to raise our grandchildren to understand who they are. And so they can't go to Ghana schools because the education is Christian based, and uh, the discipline is much too harsh. It doesn't believe in allowing the children to think critically on their own. And so we have this sister in our group now who has cried at the thought of how repressed her education has been. We got to break that mold, and our people have to, all over the globe, have to lobby and create institutions that will allow our children the liberation to be free. And there's no better place for that, the continent of Africa, Kemet. It has to be free so that our people can rise up to their glory.
Nathan and Julia Hare just dropped down when you said something. I don't know how it came to
Yes.
me. Nathan, I apologize. Just like, it seems random, but it just you did something. It's like that's who it is. So this this idea of
Yes.
liberation,
But let me
liber.
say,
Go
connect
ahead.
back. That was a couple. That was a couple that I was listing people that inspired me in the Association of Black Psychology, and that sister was a fireball. So
Right. I don't know how this came to. It's amazing, but I just want people to recognize what you said, and that is about the consciousness breaking the chains and then moving into a space where you liberate yourself and to identify the enemy. I think too many times we think that this process is going to be easy, right? We think that you just simply you start walking and living and that's it. But when you start to activate yourself, you mentioned Thomas Sankara and others, that when you begin to activate on your consciousness of who you are, that the attacks come because of the anti-African space that we live in. I think that Baba Kamal reminds us it's not racism. He talks about terrorism, right? The idea of white terroristic activities that always coming against us. And when we recognize that that is the enemy, I think at that point we're able to establish institutions because we're not trying to figure out how to navigate them. We're saying, listen, this is what I can do. And so your children have to show us this. We don't have to go into those spaces because now we liberate ourselves. The idea of freedom and liberation could go hand in hand. I think that's a powerful message for the entire continent, that we're not. You have to use African to talk about kemet, to talk about the things that we've done, the obelisk or the tekken, the idea of understanding that our memory, our codes are all over this planet, And so, in closing, what are some of the things? I was so much I wanted to get to, but what are some of the things, the key things that you would like to leave us with as people to elevate ourselves? You mentioned about being in the sun and about being intentional about elevating ourselves, but what give us like some things that we can walk with in the African world or the Kemet world, um, committed world to become to be and to become blacknificent.
So first, one of the most important things is you have to identify the enemy, because we cannot move forward in this space unless we know who the enemy is and what our fight needs to be there. Yet you have to have a break sometime. Well, I don't know if it's a break. You have to restore and build yourself sometime. So in doing so, you have to nourish yourself. You have to nurture yourself. And we should do that as a collective. And so this time now that we're in this pandemic time has moved us too much away from each other. So we have to find ways to find that social connection that restores and rebuilds and connects our culture. Yes, we need to walk in the sun daily, even when it's cold. We have to breathe in deeply and learn how to breathe. And on Onipa, ONIPA, onipa.com, Onipa guided meditation, we have a free breathing exercise so that you can go in there and restore breath to your lungs, to your brain. We don't understand the role of the melanin. We must learn how to nurture that. What foods, including breath, contribute to stimulating that, which is a protection for us. We must take our shoes off and walk in the grass, walk in the beach, walk on the sand to receive, not only to receive what nature can give us, but also to release the toxins from this world. And we must release ourselves from toxicity. Got to get off that boob tube. You got to get off even spending too much time on the internet. It's been a powerful vehicle during this period for us because people have connected all over the globe. So we're not saying eliminate it, but you got to balance. You have to have ma'at, harmony and balance. And so much of what we need is not here, it's out there. We have to understand in building anything, the foundation, we must study first before we try to bring in anything. And we must listen to our ancestors. And the only way we do that is to pour libations and sit there and hear what they have to tell us. Hear it. And you sit there until you begin to hear, day by day by day. So this is a prescription I give to holistic health. Be in tune with nature. Your ancestors are part of nature. Be in tune with them. Write your thinking. Change those. Yes, you may have some horrible, traumatic memories, but now you're in charge. Rebuild, restore, remove, rethink thoughts. So have affirmations, listen to positive music, go back and listen to some of the African rhythms that are spirit rhythms that can bring us forward. So that's what I would offer. And I invite you to Onipa Guided Meditation and Black Therapy Central, where we have a 7-day healing challenge on blacktherapycentral.com. I invite you to all the platforms on abibitumi.com, Abibitumi Casa, to learn African languages. We teach Chi, Asante Chi, Kiswahili, Wolof, Medinecher. I think that's all that's on there at this point. So we have taught other languages as well there, and to BB Tumi TV, where you can
How,
learn and listen.
how do you spell a BB to me?
ABIBITUMI.com. A BB Black to Me Power.com.
And Onipa? How do you spell
O
Onipa?
N I P A. ONIPA. Onipa is of the people. So the work I do is for the people.
So Thank you so much, Madasi Pa. You mean to tell me that we can go to Bibitumi and we can learn how to say Huta Sayan, we can learn how to say Nagadef, and Habaragani, right? And we can learn all of this. We can reconnect with the vibratory frequency of our people that came through language. We can also understand what Hotep means, right? I understand Ra, Kepara. So this is the work of African consciousness. When we talk about this work of consciousness building, this is not only a purveyor of truth, Dr. Mawia Kambon, the one who talks about the work that she did in AB Psi, but in her own life, she's the living testimony of this process of what happens when you not only hear the ancestors, but you listen and you move in concert with the ancestors. I think many times we can hear, not always listen. Also we can listen but not act. Many people will hear. Many cars will have airwaves of various stations to come to them, but only some tune in. Dr. Maria Cambon has tuned in, and she and her family, her husband, children are tuned in. They're dialed up, and they're activating African consciousness. And it speaks to what we all have to do, to stop, to be, to listen, to identify the oppressive nature, the forces in our lives, and to know that we are victorious because we are the seed of a seed of a seed of the seed. When we understand that, then we know that nothing can destroy us and that we'll always be victorious. And as we learned in Ghana, forward ever, backwards never. Thank you all so much for tuning in on this day. And be sure to check out and follow Dr. Mama Mawia Cambon. Her work has moved me, keeps moving me. She is my mother. And so I honor her for raising me in consciousness to know that I am the son of greatness. Ashe, Ashe. Thank you.
I